Welcome to our webinar today. Our webinar is called Data Meets Urban Design. This event is co-hosted by IAC, the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, and All Things Urban. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name is Naila Sanyour. I'll be moderating this session on behalf of All Things Urban. We're also joined by Anastasia Sukhroslova, CEO of All Things Urban, Sarine from IAC, Jacopo, Mathilde, and Alex from the IAC team. And as you get settled, I just want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can turn your camera off. And if you wish to see the speaker enlarged on the screen rather than seeing the gallery view, you can go on the top right corner of your Zoom window and set it to speaker view. So you have the speaker highlighted. I also want to invite you all to drop us a message in the chat and say where you're joining us from, what part of the world you are right now. So hello from Madrid. And nice to see so many people here. Now, before giving a proper introduction to our guest speakers today, with a proper short bio, and before giving the floor to them, I want to let you know just a rundown of how our session will go. So in the first part of the session, we will have a presentation of a few projects about data and urban design, as the name of this event states. So we'll start with the presentation of our first speaker, Mathilde Marengo, Head of Studies at IAC. She'll first dive in the topic of urban technology for collaborative design. The presentation will continue with our second speaker, Jacopo Neri. Jacopo is an alumnus and currently faculty at IAC. So he'll guide us through the topic of computational tools for ecological design. And after these two presentations, we will have a first round of questions from you, from the audience. So while the speakers present, we invite you all to post your questions in the chat, and then we'll make a selection to your questions to ask Mathilde and Jacopo. That's the first part. And then in the second part, this is actually a collaboration between All Things Urban and IAC. And we would like to present you an exciting educational opportunity at IAC, which is the Masters in City and Technology. It's quite a unique program that we'll present to you, that Mathilde will actually present to you after her first presentation, where this program offers expertise at the intersection of urbanism and data science and takes place in Barcelona. The program is actually co-directed by Mathilde, and it's where Jacopo studied and is currently faculty. And the projects that you will see very soon are quite related to what you would learn and explore in this master's program. I'm actually going to post the link to the program in the chat so you can have a look. And IAC also offers scholarship, which we encourage you to explore, including specifically one for women called Women in Tech Scholarship that we're posting here, the link to the All Things Urban post. But you can also, Sarine, please feel free, and Alex, to add more links about everything related to the program, to IAC, and yes. So for the second part, after the presentation of the Masters in City and Technology, we'll have another quick round of Q&A to respond to all your specific questions about the program. The IAC team, as I mentioned, Sarine and Alex, who are here on the call with us, will be available to address any questions about the program, the application process, and the scholarship offered to support your education. So before going into the presentation, let me introduce our first guest speaker, Mathilde. Mathilde Marengo is an Australian, French, Italian PhD architect, so many nationalities, who specializes in contemporary urban phenomena at the integration of technology for a sustainable future. As I mentioned, Mathilde is head of studies at IAC. She's also co-directing the Masters in City and Technology that we'll present to you later. She's also a faculty and PhD supervisor. She's part of the Advanced Architecture Group at IAC, and also involved in numerous national and EU research projects with her work published and exhibited globally. I'm gonna post Mathilde's LinkedIn in the chat. So Mathilde, you're gonna be bombarded. And without further ado, Mathilde, the floor is yours for presentation. Mathilde, do you need
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
super.
Okay, my screen is just loading. Fantastic. So thank you so much, Naila, and thank you to everyone from All Things Urban for making this possible. It's a huge pleasure for myself and Jacopo, my dear colleague and friend, for us to share some of the work that we've been developing at IAC together with our colleagues around the topics of data and urban design and how we can enable urban design processes to become inclusive and resilient through data-driven design approaches. Before we go into the actual projects, I also just wanted to give you a little rundown of what IAC is. So for those of you who don't know IAC, we are a research, education, digital fabrication and promotion center, and we're located in Barcelona. The Institute is quite a young institute. It was founded just over 20 years ago around the topic of, or the concept of advanced architecture. When the Institute was founded, those who founded it came together and saw a change in paradigm in the discipline of architecture, specifically, but in general spatial design, where design was no longer just related to the physical realm, but also became integrated with the digital realm as well. And hence this collaboration between data, digital information and physicalization of our spaces that we inhabit. Today, our institute is devoted to shaping the future habitat for our society, and what we're interested in is building it in the present. So we're often working together with real projects, working together with the city in order to be able to implement these solutions that we develop within the institute in order to have or shape in some way a positive future. In order to be able to do all of this, we follow the mission of the Fab Lab network. So our institute is actually home to Fab Lab Barcelona, which was the first Fab Lab in the European Union, and is one of the biggest. And this mission is in order to give tools and knowledge, access to tools and knowledge to be able to educate, innovate and invent, and fundamentally make almost everything we need to be able to live. So as part of our institute, we have several labs now, Fab Lab Barcelona, Green Fab Lab in our Valdara campus, which you will see shortly, and the Atelier Lab. So here is an image of our Valdara campus, which is just 20 minutes away from the center of Barcelona. And fundamentally, as an institute, we have the challenge or we aim to sort of work around the topic of self-sufficiency. So what we're looking at is in some way empowering people to be able to make real change within the context of their environment, for their environment, with their environment, so working together with the environment, creating in some way a performative habitat through the integration of physical and digital information, and evolve in some way altogether towards a positive future. So in order to be able to do that and be successful at that, we work in, I would say, four main approaches. One is systemic design, so approaching the aspect of architecture or design, spatial design, urban design, all designs through systemic design, so multi-scalar approaches to design, multidisciplinary, so working together with other disciplines and engaging actively ourselves with other disciplines within our processes. Design through research or research by design, so actively engaging with innovation directly within the design process. The second thing that we work strongly through is learning by doing. So we work with real case studies, real-time information, we work with the city as a laboratory, and we work together with the industry in order to be able to test the solutions that we develop and understand their impact, but also adapt them through feedback loop processes. Third pillar is that we share information. So we have several distributed educational formats, and we as an institute are globally connected and locally productive. And finally, we are adaptable and horizontal. So the institute itself is constantly evolving, and we are working together in order to be able to give shape to these missions. So as I was saying, through research, education, development, and promotion, we follow the digital revolution at all scales in order to push the boundaries of architecture and design to meet the challenges that we face as humanity today. So in order to be able to give you some ideas of how we do that within the context of data-driven design and urban design, I've put together the first part of the presentation, and then I'll pass the word on to my colleague Jacopo. I'm going to be talking about how data-driven design can enable inclusive urban design processes. and particularly how we can foster collective intelligence for urbanism. So looking at the development of a series of participatory design tools that can enable us collectively to design urban spaces. And so this here is Barcelona. I don't know if many of you know Barcelona, but I imagine that many of you are aware of the let's say urban morphology of Barcelona. Barcelona is known as the Workshop for Urbanism. The plan was developed by Ildefonso Cerdà, in the 1800s, mid-1800s. And Barcelona faces a very large challenge, which is that of air pollution, often due to the high level of vehicular traffic within the city. So the city has implemented a strategy since let's say early 2000s, looking at the implementation of what we call the superblocks, or superilla in Catalan, supermanzana in Spanish. And today, probably many of you have seen the images of the superblock that have been implemented through tactical urbanism strategies. And these images look a little bit like this. But the truth is that in the early days of the superblocks, this image here is from 2016, if I'm not wrong, what was happening was something a little bit more like this. So the City Council had implemented or decided certain areas in order to implement superblocks. And this was one of the first superblocks in the Eixample area, which was actually, it's located very, very close by to Ajax. So on day one of the superblock implementation, what we had was something that looked a little bit like this. What's quite interesting is that although the superblocks sit within a series of goals, which is part of the urban ecology plan of Barcelona, and that are incredibly sort of positive environmental, but also social goals for the city, the initial reception of the superblocks was in fact an incredibly critical one. So we had on one side, the neighborhood associations demanding to be part of the decision-making process, but we also had, for example, one of the main newspapers questioning whether or not this model of superblocks would in fact enable the reduction of air pollution that we saw previously was quite high. So what we as an institute began to ask ourselves is, how can we actively engage with citizen inputs in order to in some way shape the public space? And how can we use digital tools to be able to facilitate this? So how can we in some way bring design and society together? But we weren't just interested in some way creating a condition where design and society could dialogue. And we decided to do this through a gaming interface, but we were also interested in creating a condition through which you could, within this context of dialogue, participate in design, but also question what are the impacts of design, and therefore learn about what are the processes of designing this public space we inhabit, making critical and conscious decisions for the design that you implement in your public space. And so in order to be able to do this, we decided to develop a gaming interface platform. This platform is in fact the Super Barrio platform. So the platform was initially developed within the context of the Master in City and Technology, which we will hear more about later on today, and was developed within the context of the Super IA pilot project. So the initial stage of the Superblock. So fundamentally, what we did was we implemented this gaming platform that would enable citizens to actively participate within the context of the design of this new superblock, which had emerged recently. Both Alex and Jacopo were actually students at this time, and so you might see some pictures of them. But as I was saying, the gaming interface wasn't just designed in order to be able to design the space in itself, but it was also designed in order to be able to learn, question, and understand what it means, or what are the implications of designing urban space. So each of the modules that you could select, drag, and drop into the space was fitted with a series of counters that enabled you to understand the evaluation of the elements that you drag and drop into the space according to their accessibility, ecology, energy consumption, cultural and social impacts, and economic impacts. Fundamentally, what happened was that the users of the game had the opportunity to look at each of these different elements and in some way decide in order to be able to design a balanced urban design scenario, but also with the aim of gaining the highest points possible. So from our side, as the designers who have implemented this interface, what we can extract is a series of geolocated information that enables us to understand what are the citizens' desires in what places, and for example, in what specific points do citizens desire more ecological questions to be answered, more sociological questions to be answered, more transversal questions to be answered, and so on and so forth. So this gaming platform has since been further developed and implemented within the context of several EU projects. One of them being the Urbinat project, which is a Horizon 2020 project oriented to implementing inclusive and innovative nature-based solutions within cities. Specifically within the Urbinat project, Super Barrio was implemented and redesigned in order to engage citizens, municipalities, neighborhood associations, and architects together within the design of 3 green corridors in the cities of Sofia in Bulgaria, Nantes in France, and Porto in Portugal. As you saw previously, the project of Urbinat is strongly focused on the implementation of innovative and inclusive nature-based solutions. So the modules or the elements that were implemented within the Super Barrio game have been adapted to these thematics, and based on a series of KPIs that have been developed through the Urbinat project, EU project in itself. So we find technological solutions, territorial solutions, participatory solutions, and social economy solutions. These include a series of different solutions, but also with the option always to design your own nature-based solution within this category. As within the previous edition of Super Barrio, the elements that you had were scored against nature, well-being, health, mobility, participation, and economy. And therefore, once again, the citizens were invited to engage with the design of their space using the different elements in order to design the most balanced space possible according to the indications of the Urbinat project and within the 3 green corridors. The gaming interface looks a little bit like this time. And this is the interface for Nantes in France. So actually the interface is in French. And we once again implemented a series of events in order to invite the citizens to participate and engage with the design of these 3 green corridors. So here, once again, we see that each of the elements have been scored, and you can see the overall score of the different designs that were collected. Again, we have a geolocated map, heat map, that allows us to understand where certain elements are desired in the space according to the citizens. And here we have the possibility to come together and design these 3 green corridors, which are currently being implemented within the cities of, as I was saying, Nantes, Sofia, and Porto. Super Barrio has actually recently been selected as one of the New European Bauhaus finalists for 2023. So it would be a huge honor if each of you could help us out. The voting for the New European Bauhaus final projects closes tomorrow. So we'd love for you to sort of help us out. You will find Super Barrio there. As I was saying, Super Barrio was initially developed within the Master in City and Technology. After the Master in City and Technology, it was implemented in Favara, in the Farm Cultural Park there, in Genoa, in Italy, with the redesign of the Casa Gavoglio area. And more recently, as I was saying, in Urbinat, with the design of the 3 green corridors in Nantes, Porto, and Sofia. And with that, I am happy to pass on the words to my colleague, Jacopo, but not before Naya has presented him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilde. Thanks so much for your presentation. And it's interesting because in the profession of urbanism, we often hear about Barcelona Superblock being somehow an ideal example of public spaces, but then you gave us a closer look of how it is in reality down in the ground with the people who actually live them, and giving us a much more granular view. And I particularly like how you work with data and how people are invited to reflect, and how non-experts can actually see their environment in a new way through different interfaces. I want to encourage all of you to ask your questions to Mathilde, as some of you have been doing in the chat. And now I want to introduce our second speaker, Jacopo Neri. So Jacopo explores the intersection of architecture, computer science, and urban planning through his research. He's been involved in teaching activities at the University of Florence, the Polytechnic University of Milan, the École des Ponts Paris-Tech, and at IAC, where he is now faculty of computational design. And Jacopo, in parallel, you're currently serving as a scientific collaborator for the Department of Digital Visual Studies at the University of Zurich, and as front-end developer at Numena, Barcelona. So Jacopo, happy to have you share your screen and continue the presentation. And thank you everyone for posting your questions in the chat. Go for it, Jacopo.
Should be all able to see my screen? Thank you so much for this call. And I'm going to continue the presentation from the inside of MaCT, this time focusing more on competition aspects and also projects, student projects of our students. Indeed, we saw how digital technologies through Supervario can enable people to collectively design landscape and public spaces. And perhaps just make this small. And but we wonder if can digital technologies enable designers to approach landscape under a dynamic, collective, multidisciplinary, multi-scale perspective? And can the access to ecological data sets embedded into design processes allow nature to have an active voice in design, to empower ecological connectivities in urbanized areas? Why are these questions important? Well, we live in a world in which definitely our impact goes beyond reach. We live in a world in which humankind is the same impact of geological process. Indeed, we live, let's say we occupy physically 3%. We might say that we occupy physically 3% of the world, but we transform 75% of it. And therefore, sometimes the consequences of our living might be very tangible and, let's say, visible, while other times they might not, such as in the case of landscape fragmentation, that it's a dynamic that is threatening natural system in a wide sense. And it's a dynamic that it's basically created by the disconnections of such systems due to the expansions of human-centric, let's say, infrastructure. And as we further inspect such phenomena and such dynamics, we see that they reach their peaks in towns where the level of such disruption, it's mostly witnessed. So in this sense, like we realize, it's obvious that cities becomes nodes, fundamental nodes to address climatic change, to address dynamics, to have a wider impact. But obviously, how do we do such thing? How do we interact with such complex, rich from both economically, culturally, even design-wise, such rich context and such challenges? And how do we do it differently, perhaps from the way in which we did it until now? And how can we learn from also other disciplines, other ways of thinking? And in this case, the example that I'm going to go through, they take a lot of inspiration from dynamics of landscape connectivities, so connectivity studies as a mode, as an action to counterattack such phenomenon that we just introduced, which is obviously a question that it's not cannot find a one-to-one answer, even more when we address the complexity of the urban real. And but that leaves us a lot of space to also engage, and that we can do definitely supported by technologies, by computation in a broader sense, such as in this case, where alongside Matilde, we introduced this project recently in Acadia, in which we tried to foster at a street scale level, the connectivity between the metropolitan forest, so the metropolitan natural system, and the inside of a city, let's say its green pockets. And that is obviously something that we can do critically different from the way in which we used to work until recently, due to the availability of global data sets of information for the entire world that allow us to replicate such methodologies, such approaches in different contexts, which in this case, like for example, we see it apply for the city of Berlin, Madrid, and Milano. More in depth, I'm going to go through two students' projects in which we introduce a methodology that that empowers designers to engage with nature as an active partner in the process of urban design. And we reconsider, in this sense, the polarization between ecological forces and anthropocentric one in order to provide an opportunity to consciously design for and within climate change adaptation. The data-driven methodology we need to do with data-driven uses computational logics explored in environmental studies to foresee ecological patterns and include nature as a driver of the design process, fostering keystone species as enabler of ecological connectivity. So in this case, the projects that I'm gonna showcase are actually the results of the first course that we hold in the MaCT in Technology, of which me and Matilde, alongside our colleague Eduardo Rico, are faculties. The project starts in the city of Barcelona, comparison with another city that in every year changes. Barcelona is a particularly interesting case study, as now mentioned by Naila, but also previously by Matilde, as a city that has been activating a series of processes in order to engage, let's say, with climate change. And one of them is also critically and directly addressing the connectivity at the street level. In this case, though, our question is, how do we scale it up? How do we look at the wider system? So how do we look at the territorial scale in order to move from a current very much extracted condition into one in which we might have much more performances having directly from the territory surrounding us. In this case, the students are challenged to identify a dynamic, and for this project specifically, the that we have been trying to address is a phenomenon that is very, let's say, very common in the whole Spain. That is the abandoning of agricultural practices, which, as you can see in this place, is being reported as black areas. So within this context, looking at this rather than a condition, more as an opportunity, how can we reactivate? How can we re-enhance the capacity, the ecological capacity of such abandoned plots in order to foster ecological connectivities? And computation plays a key role when we are facing such an abundance, in a way, of thoughts to interact with, but perhaps like when we need to allocate certain resources that are definitely limited. So in this case, taking advantage of connectivity studies, what we have been analyzing, what our students have been analyzing, it's in the using such tools that normally are used in order to protect, let's say, certain areas around the globe, in order to evaluate a potential impact. So very much in a design scale, basically, in order to read this image, what you should be reading is, what if the spots that I just introduced as low performance spots, so abandoned areas, what if they were like oases? What if they were highly performative areas? What would be the connectivity that would emerge? And this allows us to engage with other species, in this case specifically with the pollinators, as keystone species in order to foster basically a change in the wider ecosystem. The methodology that we have been applying, the methodology that has been introduced, is the one of scaling down from a territorial dynamic to concrete design areas. And we do that through multiple analysis, starting from a land use, then therefore implementing something more project-based, such as the connectivity that introduces scenarios, in order to then zoom in into the context and perhaps understand what is the real setting of the place that we are analyzing, which in this case was allowing us to drive into this specific area in the metropolitan coast of Barcelona, in order to visualize the potential impact of specific design operation. Obviously, this very much taking advantage of the data sets that are provided by the municipality and also by the different institutions around the world. So in this case, starting from a catalog of the local conditions, so starting from a potential, let's say, categories of landscape, of areas, in order to evaluate what are the most important to start with. So always with this idea of trying to make the best out of the few. So in this case, highlighting the areas that are crucial in order to reactivate basically the whole connectivity, which again would be scaling up in the wider system. This therefore was ending with some design proposal in which, for different typologies, from the abandoned crops to the active crops to the potential natural areas, the infrastructure, we were able to then specifically design intervention at this smaller scale, but always being able to read the project backwards up to the territorial dimension. And also with a specific and particular attention to the influence of local actors, in this case schools, in order to foster citizen science activities, which in this case would allow us to maintain and to, let's say, provoke a long-term effect. In a secondary project, in this case, I'm perhaps going to go a little bit briefer because I think we start to be tight on time. We focus in the city of Madrid. And in this case, we try to bring it back to a scenario in which the city of Madrid nowadays is experiencing very much of a deforestation issue. So we try to convert this phenomenon through the active partner of red squirrel, which used to be an autochthonous animal, which now is disappearing in the context of the metropolitan area of Madrid, which actually can provide us a concrete, tangible, positive benefit for the city, because simply through their way of living, what they do is very interesting. They basically gather food and they just disseminate all over a big territory, and most of the time they forget about it. So automatically allowing new plants to grow from the storages of seeds that they do. So in that sense, again, very much focusing on impacts and also scenario based, we have been studying, like we have been trying to address it within this big narrative, the dynamics of urban heat island, and also as we were saying, the deforestation, but also the health of the vegetation that is present in the city. Therefore, identifying different scales of action, went from the wider one that it's also tackling the forest system of the city, up to the very narrow center of Madrid. Each one of them in order to provide a different context for action, but also overall to provide an infrastructure, a green infrastructure that will be able to connect, and as we were saying, counteract this phenomenon of landscape fragmentation and the city scale through the connection of the wider green ecosystem. And again, exploring connectivity analysis, connectivity studies in order to understand where at best to implement such infrastructure, such design. Obviously, with a particular attention to the green infrastructure, therefore also trying to identify which type of species and which type of plants might provide certain benefits in order to finally allocate design strategies with the intention of supporting the habitat for this actor, which now it's not considered anymore as a simple animal, let's say, living in the city, but rather an engineer, an actor that is able to foster and produce certain conditions for the natural ecosystem, for the green infrastructure to thrive. And finally, what we imagine is that through this project, so through these ideas, through these concepts, what we imagine is to move from the city scale to the wider territorial area in order to promote a more performative environment that will be able to, in this case, either collect carbon or in a way like fossil, also non-human centric practices. I hope that I was not too fast with these two presentations, and I would love to know your opinion and comments about it. We know that you have been writing in the chat. Perhaps maybe now is the time before we move to the introduction of the course. So I don't know if Nelia,
Thank you. Thank you, Jacopo. That was great, and it's quite a striking presentation with a lot of visual, and it's super interesting how you showed us how data can help you perceive the territory in a very different way, that it would reveal things that we wouldn't be aware of, that would be invisible to us otherwise, like the connection with fauna and flora species. Now, Mathilde, I see that you have already been responding to a lot of questions super quickly in the chat. I encourage everyone also to share, yes, to share some questions to Jacopo as well. Before going into the questions from the audience, maybe actually we can take some time to go now through the presentation of the masters in city and technology that Mathilde, you would present to us, because you've already been answering the questions. And while Mathilde presents, Jacopo, you can take some time to respond on the chat. because now we're a bit tight on time, and if we take all the questions, then we won't have space for the presentation. So Mathilde, if that's good with you, we can already go with the presentation of the master's program.
Yeah, of course. Give me 1 second. I think I almost answered all of the questions. If I haven't answered your question yet, I apologize, and I will do it hopefully shortly. I will just go back to sharing my screen once again. Sorry about that.
So Jacopo, you can already take advantage of that time to go through the questions.
Sorry, I just had to reload the presentation. All right. I hope everyone is still doing well. And oops, sorry, 1 second. I'm not sure I shared the screen correctly. Okay, great. So
Super,
firstly,
thank you.
Yeah, it's loading, no? You think? Yeah.
Yeah, it's loading.
It's loading. Okay, so while it loads, I wanted to take the time to thank everyone who dropped a question in the chat. I hope I answered more or less some of your questions, but in any case, I think you have mine and Jacopo's contacts in the chat, and we'd love to get in touch with you to answer any more questions that you have. So it's a huge pleasure for me to present our Master in City and Technology. So this program is a program that runs in both a 1 year and, a 9-month and an 18-month format. It's a full-time program, and it's taught in English, and we run it from our campus here in Barcelona at IAC. And the idea is that the program redefines the practices of urban design and planning for 21st century cities. So as we know, we live in a world of cities, and urban populations continue to grow at an unprecedented rate. So this calls for us to redesign the way in which we analyze, plan, and design for this new urban condition. And the Master in City and Technology aims to do exactly that. So in the MaCT, we call it for short, we tackle issues related to increase of urban population, social exclusion, or climate justice, and more. And these present both huge challenges, but also opportunities in some way when being able to design what the future holds for us. So in the MaCT, we fundamentally believe that if we place knowledge coming from different disciplines in the same arena, we're able to in some way develop novel urban solutions and models of living that can in some way take us towards a positive future. So in order to be able to do this, we develop a multi-scalar approach that is enabled by the potentials of sciences and humanities and technologies. And fundamentally, we train urbanists, architects, engineers, computer scientists, technologists, but also many people coming from completely different disciplines. So for example, the discipline of business, sociology, environmental sciences, and more. And we train these people all together in the same space, placing them in one single team. So by doing this together, we have the potential in reality to radically transform the urban and built environments that we're shaping. The program structure follows 3 terms, and each of these focuses on a different expertise. So from the design of digitally enhanced, ecological, and human-centered urban environments, we intersect, as I was saying, the discipline of urban design and data science. So the program follows a 3-term structure, as we were saying before, and we touch on different spaces of design, spaces where we engage actively with technologies, spaces of strategic planning, and spaces of understanding the theories and practices of this new contemporary urban condition. The first term is dedicated to the Internet of Cities. So Jacopo actually showed some of the projects that he, myself, and Eduardo have been teaching in that sense. And Internet of Cities explores the use of data related to ecosystems, mobility, air quality, or flora and fauna, with the goal of strategically developing work in the larger territorial context. We want to understand new ways of cartographical representations and new ways of visualizing energy of materials and human flows within these contexts. The second term is dedicated, the third term actually, but the second is the Internet of Buildings. And the Internet of Buildings deals with buildings as the nodes of the city. So as the nodes of a larger network. Fundamentally looking at the city as a new infrastructure, and this allows us to explore new typologies where buildings can offer the city's services, such as renewable energy generation, decarbonization mechanisms, and even distributed waste management processes. In fact, Sarin developed her thesis project directly in the Master in City and Technology. So if you have questions about that, you can ask her directly. And finally, we have the Internet of People. So this introduces the significance of qualitative versus quantitative data, from data about how people feel to data about how people perceive spaces and how communities gather together. Data types are not as easy to measure and quantify, but by placing citizens at the center, we can develop new forms of cities that can be enabled through technologies that enable us, as we saw previously in the presentation that I gave earlier, enable us as citizens to participate in co-design processes, but also co-management processes of cities in themselves. During the program, the students are also trained in the latest tools for computational design, urban simulations, and spatial data science, as well as attending seminars on programming, dynamic mapping, big data analytics, and visualization and parametric design. So the program, as I was saying, runs both in a one-year edition and 2 years. So in the second year, the students have the opportunity to propose an individual thesis agenda that they develop alongside a series of advisors that come from different backgrounds and can support them in the development of these. In parallel to that, they also have the opportunity to develop a series of digital tools, so more advanced digital tools, as well as digital fabrication, and also the application in a series of projects and EU projects as well, implementing solutions within the cities. So we have actually a group of students who just last week pitched to the City Council of Genoa in collaboration with students from other universities and other backgrounds, developing a series of green strategies for the city of Genoa in a project called Green Skills for Cities. So within the context of our second year, we have, here we have Jacopo, we have different topics that we focus on. So for example, AI for city making. There was a question on machine learning in the chat previously. I suggested to go check out our GitHub. Participatory design through technologies, climate adaptive cities, and of course, circular economy and design for urban futures. So within the second year, the students have the possibility to continue to learn advanced computational tools for the analysis and design and management of urban spaces. And this, of course, includes machine learning processes and artificial intelligence for both quantitative data, but also qualitative data, as we can see here. And the thesis development is also accompanied by digital fabrication and technologies for interaction, enabling students to create demonstrators and digital and physical interfaces for their projects and their theses. Finally, as a program, we count with the collaboration of many great industry and academic partners, including the MaCT Hub, based in Milan and specialized on mobility and transport planning. Arethian, which is focusing on urban analytics and design. Foster and Partners in the development of productive cities within the context of urban design. MDRDV and the Y Factory in the development of planning for ecology and sustainability, and the City Intelligence Lab of the Austrian Institute of Technology for the development of urban AI platforms. So as I was saying, the program counts on the development and the understanding of several tools and software. These are some of the ones that we focus on mostly. And we also count with the collaboration of many industry, academic and public sector partnerships, as well as the possibility to work and develop projects within the context of several EU funded projects. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I think we have a few more minutes for questions. They can be, I guess, questions on the master program, but also questions on the project that we previously showed. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mathilde, for this great presentation. As you were presenting the projects and as Jacopo was presenting the projects, you got a lot of questions, but you already managed to answer most of them. I'll actually surface some of the questions that you did not answer yet. Perhaps, Jacopo, you're still typing some of your extensive answers.
Sorry about that.
No, but you did great in answering all of that in super fast. So I think I'll address one question to Mathilde about the project. So it's about the Super Barrio. Can the parameters of the Super Barrio app be customized by an independent user based on the specific project needs, or it's only possible from your end? So they're asking about customization of the app.
You want to go, Jacopo?
Please go. I'm still typing. I know that I will be agreeing with you.
Okay. Well, actually, I was saying Jacopo or Alex, they were part of the first edition. And so up until now, each edition of the Super Barrio always has the option for the user to suggest their own module, no? So it's a collaborative design platform, and the design platform also has a collaborative aspect within its actual design, no? So there's, let's say, a multi-scalar. This being said, when we've developed the Super Barrio platform and we've used it in specific contexts. So for example, the Super Barrio platform that was developed for the Urbanet project focuses on inclusive and innovative nature-based solutions. And therefore we've done a study. I actually shared some information in the chat. We've done a study that enables us to collect information on KPIs and best practice projects that have already been evaluated and we already have data on, and that can enable us to design modules for these spaces. There's also actually in the initial edition of Super Barrio, there was also a co-design process for the selection of the modules that were actually put into the gaming platform, as well as the categories that were put into the gaming platform. And this co-design process was done through a more traditional approach to co-design, through surveys and interviews that enabled actually the students of the program, as well as the faculty and researchers and collaborators went out and got that information. So hopefully I answered your question more or less.
Super. And another question for Jacopo that you didn't catch yet as you were typing for all of the others. So Diederik says, I love the way you visualize ecological connectivity. And they were wondering if all green areas are considered as equally valuable, or if there's a parameter on biodiversity quality that was included in the model.
So indeed, I answered that too. No, but I'm kidding. Okay. It's just that I'm afraid I cannot really answer each one specifically. I don't know why I need to do it in this way. My answer was yes, but it's specific, let's say, to each project. Indeed, we use this tool very much also to speculate on design proposal. So rather than evaluating the conditions that are now present, to evaluate the impact of possible interventions. So in that sense, the assessment becomes very specific to also what is the impact that we're trying to evaluate. And I was suggesting to go into the two links, where obviously there's more information than the one that I could go through the short presentation. But yes, all of them are very different.
I think maybe it's, oh, sorry, no.
Go
I
for
think
it,
maybe an answer to that as well. I'm not sure if you saw, but when Jacopo was presenting, there was the categorization of the different plots. So according to how much they were integrated within sort of the natural area, but also the urban area, they had different evaluations. And in any case, where like the green areas, even like within the context of agricultural plots, for example, agricultural plots have different evaluations according to the type of agriculture that is being implemented there. So they all have different gradings within or in relation to their ecological performance in some way.
Super. You did, Jacopo, indeed answer this, and I saw it down. No, but
Sorry
thank you. Yeah. Actually, maybe we can start ending this with more personal questions that I would like to ask you about you and your career path and your interests. And that could be very helpful for people who are interested in studying and working in your fields, which is a blend of data, urbanism, visualization. So there's a lot packed in your disciplines. So my question to you would be, maybe Mathilde first, you answer, and then Jacopo, and then we'll see how these two questions, these two answers kind of blend with each other. But my two questions would be, so first, how did you discover your interest in this field? And what types of jobs or career opportunities are emerging that people can look at, and what advice can you give for people who are interested in working in the same fields that you are working? So yes.
Okay.
Mathilde?
I think I actually didn't study in IAC. I came to IAC halfway through my PhD. So I was already sort of developing research at the time, and that's where I really became passionate about, let's say, the urban to territorial scale and understanding. That's where I really delved into understanding that when we design a city, when we represent urban but also territorial space, we can no longer do it in a static form. Everything is constantly in movement. There is lots of dynamicity. And we also need tools to be able to project into futures, to be able to evaluate scenarios and understand how we can design today. So often the implementation or the change that we see at that scale happens over an extended period of time. And therefore we need to be able to sort of in some way understand the impacts that will happen at a later date according to the design decisions that we make today in some way. So this is where I began to be interested in this phenomenon. And I think that by coming to IAC, I really had the opportunity to sort of delve into how digital technologies can enable in some way the response to that condition. I think that maybe because we don't have so much time, I will give the second part of the question to Jacopo, but I would say that fundamentally you could take several career paths. One would be more sort of like developing, I guess, tools for designers. So the people who go through the process of the Master in City and Technology are designers, but that have a profound understanding of data sciences, or data scientists or other disciplines that then gain a profound understanding of what are the implications within the context of urban design. So how can they apply their tools? So I would say that you could develop tools. We have a lot of our alumni who have developed very successful startups around tools for urban designers. You can develop research. We have fantastic alumni who are working within research centers throughout Spain. And not only in Spain. You can also set up your own practice, of course, and practice urban design. So working within the public or private sector in that sense. And I will drop the word to you, Jacopo.
I'm not entirely sure how to continue such an insightful and informative answer. Perhaps like from my point of view, let's say I got to know this world mostly from curiosity. So coming from an architectural background, I was always a little bit unsatisfied, let's say, by the way in which things, the practice, let's say, it's normally conducted. So that mostly take me to more computation and how computation can be explored, both in the architecture scale, but also in the urban scale, also in the fabrication scale. So I would say for me, it was quite of an easy bridge, let's say, to go to IAC. Indeed, I got to IAC the first time through a conference, which this year, if Mathilde, if I'm not wrong, we should be able to let's say, propose again. There is the Responsive City Symposium that I invite you all to check, because there was always an incredibly interesting conference. And in that sense, for me, I would say that what IAC gives, more than anything, is a place to nurture creativity and curiosity. I think that it's very tangible, the way in which we have mixed, let's say, project in between disciplines and in between masters. It's a relatively, I would say, agile condition coming from much more, let's say, bureaucratic and structure in the sense of hierarchical university in Italy. IAC, it's a place in which I discover so many things that perhaps are not necessarily the one that I'm using in my work, but that I can always relate to. That I can. It's a very interesting place to be, I would say, versatile. So in my case, for example, I end up doing completely different things, as you were saying. I guess that for me, the fil rouge was mostly computation. So if you are curious about that, please drop me an email. I would love to have some chats.